The Denver Broncos received some good news as it pertains to KJ Hamler, who's working his way back from the ACL and the hip surgery from last season. Could he potentially play this weekend against the Minnesota Vikings in preseason? Nathaniel Hackett had a little bit of an update for us. Plus, we also take a look at a couple of Broncos roster transactions, including a brand new running back on the roster. What does this mean ahead of roster cuts? You get that and much more on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for taking time out of your day, making Locked on Broncos your first listen of the day, every single day, in your favorite audio podcasting platform. Or whether you're watching us on YouTube, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button or that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more every single day all year long. From the South Stands to the end zone, I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos beat reporter from Mile High Sports, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre, Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. Sayre, my friend, you know what? It's a brand new week, kind of flushing down the loss of the Buffalo Bills from last Saturday down the toilet. No time for pity potties here on the podcast. The Broncos back out on the practice field on Monday. They got to work, and there was some optimism. There was some balance. Players, were in better spirits, and I think the message is clear. Hey, Saturday did not go how they anticipated, but it's all about learning from it. It's about growing from it. And you know what? They're kind of moving forward in that direction. And a little bit of a cherry on top could be one of the Broncos' top pass catching weapons could be back this week in a more efficient capacity.
Hi, Cody. I just have to acknowledge the fact that you were just talking about flushing it down the toilet, and then you said no time for pity potties. I don't know if you meant to say it that way, but man, you did. And I think that's now legendary. That's now part of just my regular vernacular. So I appreciate you for doing that. Absolutely. You know what? It's exciting to come off a loss right now and to get some positive news like this, right? I think the Broncos kind of needed some good news going into this week. And obviously there's no repercussions in terms of your win-loss record over the course of the regular season for a preseason game. So you can just kind of flush that one down the toilet and use it as a learning experience, as we're going to talk about later on from what head coach Nathaniel Hackett had to say to you specifically on Monday at practice. So I'm excited for that. And I'm excited for KJ Hamler to get some action this week in 11-on-11, potentially play in that Vikings game. Remember the last time KJ Hamler was out there against the Vikings in a preseason game? Some good things happened. He got us all really excited about the season, and then unfortunately the injuries took place. Obviously he had the knee and the hip and that crazy recovery process. So it'll be great to be able to see him back out there in uniform playing some ball.
Well, I will tell Broncos country this, and it gives them every right, I think, to be excited. KJ Hamler did return to practice on Monday, did not go off and work on the side field. He was out there. He was in individual drills. And you know what he did? As Nathaniel Hackett alluded to earlier in the day, he said, hey, he could make his return to team drills today. He did a little bit in the red zone period, caught a touchdown in the red zone period from Russell Wilson. So that's something that you absolutely love to see with KJ Hamler getting into the mix. The Broncos slowly bringing him along. Now, even though he was able to do some team stuff in the red zone period here today, we'll see if he can continue that the rest of the week. But here's also another thing that Nathaniel Hackett threw out. He said there could be a chance, he could get some preseason snaps against the Minnesota Vikings. And really, this is the one football element that he'll get before the actual regular season. So I think this kind of begs the question here, Sayre, and we'll answer it. And obviously we want Broncos fans' feedback in the YouTube comment section down below. If you are the Broncos, is there any benefit to playing KJ Hamler specifically in this third and final preseason game? To me, that is a huge question. What are your thoughts on that?
I know I really struggle with this because I really fall in line with what these other coaches and even the Broncos coaching staff are doing in terms of not playing your starters or your key players very much at all during the preseason, right? And KJ Hamler falls into that category for me as a guy that you're really going to be relying on to do a lot of things for you, especially after the Tim Patrick injury, right? So you definitely don't want to see him go out there and get hurt, but kind of I think a lot of times players, and maybe you can speak to this more than I can, Cody, but coming off injury, you hear a lot of times like players want to go out there, they want to get hit, they just want to get that hit over with, right? And so maybe KJ Hamler is kind of falling into that, group or whatever, or maybe he's falling into the group of like with Quinn Miners, who this past weekend apparently lobbied to be able to play, and the Broncos let him go out there for a series and then pulled him off the field and just let him go out there, get your feet wet, go play a little bit. I mean, if they're not getting injured, like we saw with Josh Allen and Gabriel Davis and Stephon Diggs, if they're not getting injured, it's no harm, no foul. But again, with a player that has specific injury concerns, that's kind of where I may draw that line in the sand of being like, hey, you do have some injury issues. You're not even a year coming off this ACL injury and the hip surgery and all that stuff. So let's just wait and have you go back out there against Seattle. That would be my philosophy. But hey, I mean, I'm not the medical staff, I'm not the coaching staff, and I'm not KJ Hamler. So I don't exactly know what they're going to decide, but it'll be fascinating to see if he gets those reps.
I think you could kind of play both sides of the coin here. Like for KJ, I kind of maybe look at it in the same light as Albert Okwuegbunam, right? Like he's getting reps in the fourth quarter against the Buffalo Bills, which is good. And even Nathaniel Hackett said, he's a guy that just needs more reps. We want to get him more reps, and I understand the approach to that. With KJ, it is a little different because of the injury, but part of me is wondering, like, would it be bad to just throw him out there for a series and, not obviously not have him run like an 80-yard route downfield trying to get behind the defense, but maybe get him in on a couple of plays just to be able to block, go out there and try to make contact with another player like a Minnesota Vikings defender. And then after like one series of him just being on the field for maybe one or two snaps, maybe you pull him off. Maybe that's all he needs. And maybe it goes back to what you said, like getting that hit out of the way. Like it's different when you're going against your own guys every day in practice and guys are thudding up. They're not necessarily doing that yet. KJ Hamler hasn't necessarily had that element brought forth yet. And you also have to wonder, like, is that a good thing to get that out of the way before the regular season? Because in the regular season, if that's a little bit of an obstacle for you, it could take a little bit of time for him to get up to speed to maybe where he wants to be. Maybe this can fast track that. But I think a lot of it, like you said, is contingent upon the Broncos medical staff. It's based on what Nathaniel Hackett and the offense feels. And what you said, more importantly, how does KJ Hamler feel about that? I think that he's been very eager. Just watching him every day that he's come out to practice, he's just getting closer and closer and closer, which is a good thing. And the Broncos doing the right thing by KJ Hamler, in my opinion. The way that they're handling it, the way they're approaching it, I definitely applaud it. And hey, the Broncos don't have an issue right now because they have a lot of really good depth. So you can take your time if need be. Like if KJ Hamler's not ready to go week one, or you feel like, okay, hey, we don't want to throw him out there just yet, you have other guys that, we've talked about it. Brandon Johnson, Jalen Virgil. These guys are going to make the active roster, in my firm opinion. I think you and I feel very same about that. You have other guys who can kind of carry the weight a little bit until KJ maybe gets back to where he's feeling 100% comfortable, because at the end of the day, that is what it's all about. And Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. The Broncos added a brand new running back to the roster. Plus, they waived a player who was injured. What might that look like for this player on the defensive line? We're going to dive into that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about Athletic Greens, the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. And with one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. And this special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. All of the things that I just said there. Tons of people take some kind of multivitamin, and it's important to choose one with high quality ingredients that your body will actually absorb, and it costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit that you may have. So right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every single day. That's it. No need for a million different pills or supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NFL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NFL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Ahead of Tuesday's roster cuts from 85 players to 80, the Broncos made a roster move on Monday to kick off the week, and they have a brand new running back on the roster. What type of move does this indicate? To be determined ahead here for this Broncos football team. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Make it Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day for all your daily Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more. Make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button on your favorite audio podcasting platform, or whether you're watching us here on YouTube, also hit that comment button down below. Engage with us. We love all the interaction we get from everybody in Broncos country. Sayre, my friend, Tuesday is a very, very tough day for 5 players around the NFL. For every team, all 32 teams, 5 players will be told that they will be released and that they'll, the opportunity just simply didn't work in Denver due to other players being ahead of them on the depth chart. Interesting enough, though, on Monday, the Broncos, shortly after practice, they were awarded a running back off of waivers from the New Orleans Saints, and Devine Ozigbo is coming over at the running back position. So you know what I had to do, Sayre? I had to reach out to our good friend Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast, and I said, hey, give me the 411 on Ozigbo. What about him do Broncos fans need to know about? And here's exactly what Ross had to say verbatim, word for word. He said, Ozigbo, extremely versatile back, has some vision improvements to make as a ball carrier, but he's a strong runner between the tackles with the athleticism to get outside. He worked on expanding his route tree out of the backfield over the offseason and has shown to be reliable in pass protection, but still has some work to do in that area. And instantly when I got this text from Ross, because Ross is at Saints practice every single day, I thought to myself, outside of like Javonte and Melvin and maybe even Mike Boone, these other running backs we've been seeing, the Jaquan Hardys, the Stevie Scotts, the Max Borghies of the world, who's now with the Pittsburgh Steelers, they don't have that. They haven't had that. We haven't seen a very good display of preseason running by the Broncos and their back-end tailbacks.
We really haven't at all. And I think some of the blame obviously goes to the offensive line there, but some of the blame's got to go to the running backs. I think we just haven't seen really anything spectacular from either Jaquan Hardy or Stevie Scott, at least in that Buffalo game. And those were the only 2 guys that got any touches besides Mike Boone. And right now the Broncos undoubtedly are scouting all 31 other teams and watching all these other running backs that are getting touches here in the preseason, and kind of just like, like Ryan Howard from The Office, they got their little book and they got their names on the list and they're writing down more and more names. And Ozigbo is one of those names. And I think that, absolutely, this is an exciting pickup because I know as much as I love the NFL draft, I remember Ozigbo when he was an undrafted free agent back in 2019 coming out of Nebraska. I was really hoping that the Broncos would pick him up because I think he was one of the top players at the time that hit undrafted free agency. And he's kind of been one of those guys who's shown a little bit in preseason play over the last couple of years, but hasn't quite been able to make that leap into a regular season roster and make a rotation. But I know he did some really nice things last year with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And obviously, per Ross, he did some good things with the New Orleans Saints as well. So I think this is a more intriguing name for the Broncos as we go into this 3rd preseason game. Obviously, he's not going to come out and have this great game against the Vikings and all of a sudden crack the 53-man roster. But what you're looking for right now, in my opinion, is that replacement for Demarie Crockett, who tore his ACL early on in training camp. That's turned out to kind of be a bigger loss than I think we imagined, because you need somebody that can be your emergency back on the practice squad, or somebody who can play some special teams and you can call them up for those 3 opportunities that you have to do so throughout the season. So to me, Ozigbo is getting that first crack at that audition to be able to do that. And I think that it definitely could mean, like we talked about before the show, it could mean that in this next wave of cuts here on Tuesday, that the Broncos are going to let go of one of Jaquan Hardy or Stevie Scott. I think that's kind of what we're both thinking.
And I think it's the perfect audition for Ozigbo, as you mentioned, to be a practice squad guy. And I think really that's what George Paton and the Broncos front office is kind of looking at right now. They're looking for a guy that they believe that, initially, as you mentioned, is not going to make the 53-man roster, but will more than likely clear waivers and be a practice squad addition. I don't believe at this point in time, just based on what we've seen on the field in preseason games, I don't believe that Jaquan Hardy or Stevie Scott will be valuable practice squad running backs for this team, because think about it, your practice squad, these are guys that are going to simulate the opposing offense's looks in season, the scout team, so to be called there. So I think that, yes, maybe if Ozigbo can lock it up, I don't think that Denver's done. I think they'll add maybe another running back off of waivers from some other NFL team after the final roster cuts are made following the Broncos' Week 3 preseason matchup against the Minnesota Vikings. But yeah, definitely very interested to see if he gets a little bit of run here. But in order to make that move possible, the Broncos had to do a little bit of another roster move in order to allow this claimer to be awarded to them. And they waived, with an injury designation, Marquise Spencer. So basically, how I understand how this works, if Marquise Spencer clears waivers, Denver can easily claim him back and bring him back, and he'll start the season on injured reserve rather than ending his season altogether. He'll still be in the mix a little bit. So If he clears waivers, he'll go straight to IR, and he'll be one of those options that the Broncos do rely on, maybe a little bit down the road. But I think that practice squad, you will see that happen. Obviously, for him, the unfortunate knee injury he sustained last week in practice on the indoor facility there. Luckily enough, it was not a major knee injury, which I think is really good news. And on top of that, Sayre, you know what? The Broncos also got some pretty good injury news as well. We got to see KJ Hamler come back. I will say this, though. We saw Jonas Griffith walk out today. He had his helmet on. He walked off to the side field and obviously had one of those elbow braces on his dislocated elbow that he had. But that is a promising sign that he's already coming out. I think it's more so to stay in shape condition-wise. He's not doing anything. He's not punching bags or nothing. I think he's just moving around, staying in shape. But that'll be good. It's just a sign that he's coming back at some point, whether it be, 4 weeks from now, 5 weeks from now, maybe even 6 places for now. So I think it's something to definitely keep an eye on here for this Broncos team going forward. But Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. Nathaniel Hackett met with the media on Monday, and he was asked a question about maybe how the team might respond from Saturday's preseason loss. The physical standpoint was something that stood out, but there was some good and there was some bad. Hackett identified that with us on Monday. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about LinkedIn. And as you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job and the purple #hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. So LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. One message that the Broncos have coming into this week and the final week of the NFL preseason is they must be better on the physicality side of things. And Nathaniel Hackett believes they can't put that on tape, that they're not physical. Thank you so much, Broncos country, for tuning in. Make it Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. We appreciate you so much. Sayre, overall, I feel like the vibe, because I think one of the biggest things that I was looking forward to this week is like, what is the vibe with the players? What's the vibe in the locker room? Everyone was disappointed after Saturday's loss, and rightfully so. The Broncos got manhandled by the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo was much more physical, as we've discussed, but even Nathaniel Hackett believed that that was something that they cannot put on tape. He says, we can't be out physical. We need to find a way to improve in that category. And I think a lot of people say, well, they need to do more banging. They need to do more tackling in practice. Trust me, folks, it's not the way to get it done. It was just a simple thing where he went back and said, really, a lot of it was alignment and assignment and just a lack of execution, and that players knew where they messed up and they were able to come off on the sideline and say, coach, you know what? I didn't do this the right way. So I think that's a very positive sign. But you know what? There's some people out there that love to overreact about a preseason loss. But let's keep in mind the Broncos pretty much manhandled the Cowboys in week 1. And the Cowboys, for some reason, just manhandled the Los Angeles Chargers. Should we all be panicking? Or should we be like thinking that the Chargers aren't going to be good? Let's put a pause on the preseason narrative there, folks.
I love it. It's kind of that whole circular thing. It's like, well, the Broncos beat the Cowboys and the Cowboys beat the Chargers and the Chargers did this. So the Broncos are better than all these. I love that way of thinking. It's always funny to me to see how people kind of reason things in their minds. But I think you're absolutely right, Cody. It's one of those situations where, again, you evaluate individual performances and you take this bigger overarching experience and in the like the toughness, thing, for example, and you bring it to the table at your Monday meeting with the whole team. And you're like, look, these guys out physicaled us. They were completely manhandling us on every single play. And you don't want to go into a preseason game with the other team watching that film thinking, hey, we can just go in there and we can absolutely rough these guys up, because that's exactly the problem that I think you see from this, is that other teams will watch the film and they'll be like, oh, I'm licking my chops now. These guys just absolutely got throttled last week. So now it's my turn to go and do it to them. that's where kind of you can get beat down a little bit in this way. But Nathaniel Hackett, his message to the team, like you mentioned, it's don't let this be a wasted opportunity, right? Don't let this be a wasted opportunity to learn, because there's winning in the NFL and there's learning, like especially in the preseason, right? If you lose, it's a learning opportunity. It's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to get better. You go back and you watch the film and you say, okay, well, I can't do this again. I can't take these angles. I got to be faster at doing this. I got to be faster processing that. Watching back the game and watching Josh Johnson, the throw that Kendall Hinton's coming back on a route that he ran, he's absolutely wide open. It's how do I make sure that I hit that throw when a receiver runs a great route? Don't waste this learning experience to be able to go in and say, how could I get better this week? And then go put something great on tape against the Minnesota Vikings, because it's not just the Denver Broncos that are watching at this point. It's every other NFL team that's watching, and you could get a chance from any one of them.
I think that's a great point that you mentioned too, because everybody's keeping an eye on this Denver Broncos team. And look, I think one thing that stood out to me also from Monday is that Nathaniel Hackett said, actually Javonte said it. He said, we're not showing a lot of what we're going to do offensively in the preseason. We don't want to reveal our hand. We don't want to give too much away, which goes back to the point, like offense, you're going to have your basic, like your foundational structure. That's what we've seen Denver operate in, which kind of shows that, hey, look, they're probably going to throw the ball quite a bit this season with Russell Wilson. You do want to see them get the run game going a little bit more effectively. Not sure if that's a schematic thing. We're not sure if that's just the unit, the second and third team offensive line, and just the combination of the other backs outside of Mike Boone that have been getting reps. I think that's something to take away and maybe focus on going forward. But even more so as well, like defense is so vanilla. They're playing their base vanilla structure where, it could be man coverage, but they're playing off. They're showing everything out of a too high shell. They're not showing their blitz looks. They're not showing their different stunts that they plan to run on the defensive line with the edge rushers, also the middle linebackers, or maybe even from the nickel. They're keeping things very basic. And look, you know what? Buffalo smacked them in the mouth. But as you mentioned, in the game of life and game of football, like once you get smacked in the mouth, are you going to accept that? Are you going to just roll over and take that? I don't think that's the mentality of this Broncos team. And just seeing the players, and I even spoke to a couple players after practice, they were coming off the field. They seem like they're eager to learn. They're ready to kind of right the wrong a little bit as to what happened on Saturday, which you want that mindset. I feel like I would have been more concerned, Sayre, if guys were sulking and kind of moseying around. A lot of the players had some energy to them, very dialed in, very focused in today's practice. I think that's a good sign. And you know what? I think it's kind of a characteristic as to like the leadership that we've seen on this team, but not to mention, not just from players, from coaches, and it trickles down all throughout the entire building. I think Denver's going to be just fine. And I know that there's a lot of Broncos fans that were freaking out after Saturday. Hit the pause button, folks, because how many times did the Broncos win or dominate in the Vic Fangio era in the preseason? And what did that lead to in the regular season? Absolutely nothing. So we can't read too much into preseason. It's really about evaluating your young players, evaluating how maybe some guys can rise up, or if guys that maybe you have high expectations on don't necessarily meet them right away and need more development. That is what it's all about, folks. And you know what? We're going to be here for the entire ride this season here, covering the Denver Broncos every single day, every practice, every game. The Locked On Broncos podcast. Make us your first listen of the day every single day if you don't do so already, because Sayre Bedinger and myself, we like to interact with Broncos country. We like to break things down from an objective point of view. We're going to never be too high, never going to be too low, kind of keeping it right in the middle. And you get that here. That's our promise to you, your team, every day here, Locked On Broncos.